I'm save the elephants, right?
Hmm.
But we are save the wild, and this is the most important mission on the planet, as far as I'm concerned,
Right.
and I think as far as everyone should be concerned, because life is the only reason we're here,
Hmm.
and we're the only planet in the known universe that has life.
Welcome to Saving Wildlife with me, Sam Williams. This is where we get to hear from amazing conservationists about their life and work and all the incredible things they do to save wildlife. Frank, it's wonderful to have you here. I can clearly remember the first time I saw you on stage at Wildlife Conservation Network. Our mutual friend Hefe introduced you as the Indiana Jones of conservation. You were there with your wife Saba, and you guys were just rock stars. You live in Africa, you're working with elephants. You must have had incredible encounters with wildlife and experiences. Can you take us to one of those experiences?
Well, as you know, you don't get to live in the bush or live in the wild without having every day is there's magic all around you. Um, and I came into elephants at a slightly funny time in that I'd come out of 10 years in the ocean, working at sea, and then catapulted into working with elephants just because of meeting Saba and being exposed to this stuff and living in Kenya. You couldn't not confront the ivory trade and all that was doing to elephants. So my early encounters, my memorable early encounters, the ones that are seared in my mind, are horrific. They are elephants with their faces cut off, some of them still twitching. Um, Beautiful bulls that I started to get to know in person, alive, suddenly dead, just kilometers from our camp. And those are my sort of early encounters. Those are the ones that are seared in my brain. And there've been lots since that have been just epic and wonderful. And we've had the opportunity to bring our kids up in the best place on the planet
Right.
to spend time with elephants.
Yeah.
Like this, if you wanna be in a place where you can open a little window onto the world of the planet's one of the planet's most beautiful and complex consciousnesses, then where we live is the place to do it. So
Yeah.
it's kind of yeah, yeah, it's a I feel very fortunate to have that all in my mind and my heart. But yeah, there are lots of extraordinary experiences. You should come out.
We'll get
Yeah.
there. We'll record with a better backdrop. I've met many parrots and got to know them as individuals.
Yeah.
And you talk about consciousness. I was thinking this would be a really nice thing to talk about, where you must know it. Well, I assume you know different individuals. Can you describe some of those characters? Different. Is it? Have I got a fantasy idea about elephants, or is it very much the case?
No, of course it's the case, and that's what makes them so special. I'm a journalist. I'm a science journalist. My passion is spending time with scientists and telling their story and helping get that story out of its shell, because it's often in a shell. And one of the things that is most intriguing and most frustrating to our team is how individual elephants are. They are because you think you've proved something with elephants. Oh, finally we can show elephants do this or that, and then the next day an elephant goes and does exactly the opposite.
Right.
Because they're individuals,
Yeah.
like you and I. So, um, for instance, there's one bull that my kids have grown up around called Anwar, and he was a young teenager when we got to know him. And as you know, elephants their lives unfold at about the same pace as humans, right?
Mm.
They get mature at about the same age, and they die at about the same age. And so he was a young teenager when we got to know him, and he was obsessed with cars. And most elephants, just if they interact at all with cars in Samburu, they'll just sort of they'll pass you by, maybe avoid cars that are badly mannered. feel slightly attracted to our research cars. There's certainly David Doublon, our director of field operations. He seems to be a bit of an attractor of elephants. It does feel like they want to approach him. But Anwar was different in that Anwar, pretty much any car, he would be like, oh, he's a bit like you. I just love cars, and he would go up to cars and he would just sort of in his early years he would just spend a lot of time fondling the aerial. He'd put his trunk around the aerial and twang it this way and that, which was really charming when he was 11.
Right.
But now he's 32 or something, 33, and he's a big. He's a big guy,
yeah.
And he's coming into musk, which is this kind of state of sort of heightened sexual tension for a male, flooded with testosterone and a kind of bit of swagger and all that. But still, he sees a car and he's like, "It's a car," and he's
broken. It's 110.
Yeah, it's a 110 Defender.
Nice Defender.
Exactly. Yeah, and he will come up. And I've got footage of him doing this, but he's now done it 3 times where his affection for the car gets so intense and he drapes himself over the bonnet.
Really?
And just sort of like this. Or over the top of the car, and he squeezes it and the whole car is going and then and the windscreen goes.
I can imagine, yeah.
And it's not he's not beating the car up, he just loves the car, but just a bit too much.
That's amazing.
And I've never seen another elephant do that.
Right. Yeah, and I want to imagine that they're all nice characters, but are there any sort of annoying individuals who are sort of butt heads that you kind of just do things that are just that's well intended kind of thing, or but do you have different characters, a Disney villain or?
Yeah, well, Rommel we didn't know too. But Rommel's famous with us because he only got his name after this event, but he the first time we met him, and he was a really feisty, slightly shorter bull with a thick neck, and he had a real attitude, and he came into the park and took on one of our big resident males at the time called Abe Lincoln, and picked a fight and was having this big fight with Abe Lincoln, and then and unfortunately a research car was there watching. And he took out his frustration at not having the upper hand in this fight against the car and smashed up this car properly.
Wow.
So, but yeah, I guess crop raiding elephants are elephants with bad habits, right? They're elephants that they've got a taste for the crop and they don't know any different, right? But they will then they get into that habit and they will start saying, the famous one was mountain bull. There was this guy that lived on Mount Kenya, and he would come down, and it later turned out that all he was trying to do was go from the forest on Mount Kenya to this sanctuary that in the lowlands. But there was no corridor for him, so he would have to break through the farms. Now he would either have to break through the small holding subsistence farms or the big wheat farms. And through the big wheat farms was his preferred route, maybe because there were less fences and less people around. It was just one fence that he'd have to go through. So he'd smash through this fence, and then he'd come through snacking on the way. And he got sufficiently bad reputation that the Kenya Wildlife Service would try and chop the ends of his tusks off because they thought this is what he was using to break the fence. And because these are electric fences, they're not easy to break. But he would always figure a way of, he's very careful, and you see these guys, they will sometimes, he'll knock a branch down on it or pull a tree down onto the fence to knock it over, or sometimes even shove another elephant into the fence to short it out so that he can go through it.
That's clever.
They're clever. They're clever. Yeah.
Wow. And I picture them and I'm thinking, well, and you mentioned it like the research vehicle. Are you ever... I was in my undergraduate years. I did visit the elephant camp on my field course
in Samburu.
In Samburu, but I don't remember. Are there ever moments where you're on foot near elephants, or are they around the camp, or are you always sort of in the security of a vehicle?
There are times when you're on foot.
And what is that? What does that feel like? I mean, you must feel incredibly small and vulnerable. Just being out there. I'm thinking, okay, I've seen Kenya, I know a little bit, but for most people, this is so outside of their normal day-to-day experience. How can you describe what that's like?
So yes, it's a very different experience. Being in a vehicle, you see an elephant, and with us, you're quite because those elephants are so habituated, which is partly partly a function of the long relationship they've had with the people in that area, and partly because of the long tradition of our cars being polite around them. But anyway, they're very calm around us, and even some people that are very used to driving with elephants elsewhere, they'll be quite alarmed in getting in a car with our researchers or the guides at Elephant Watch Camp because they're like, this is dangerous. We know that it's not because we know those individuals,
Right.
but they're really quite close. You know, as close as I am to you are. And
Wow.
if the elephant had bad intentions, it would very quickly go wrong. But we know that it doesn't.
Right.
If you're on foot, it's a different story. Even with these calm elephants, and if you're on foot, it kind of feels like a fresh elephant footprint is as exciting as being up next to an elephant in a car.
Yeah, amazing.
And yeah, I suppose in the course of our work, we tend not to be. If we're in the reserve, we try not to get out of the cars because it's very visible. But if you're in the forest, particularly if you're trying to put tracking collars on, as you know, a lot of our work is about following what elephants are doing. Because they move so far, you've sort of the only way to understand what they're doing is to put tracking collars on, because you can't follow them in a car, you can't follow them on foot. They're too far.
They're going
on
too
foot.
far in a day, are they?
It's the terrain is too rough for a vehicle, and you can't stay up in the air long enough to fly after them. So really, the tracking collar is the only way to get a handle on the scale of their movements. So we spend a lot of time putting tracking collars on. And really, the only way of doing that outside of the reserve is to use a helicopter, which is fine as long as there's place for the helicopter to land. But at a certain point, you've got to go in on foot and find the elephant that's been tranquilized somewhere. And there are often other elephants around there, and that's where it can get quite lively in those situations.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
and in a forest, you can't just see that they're over there like you can on the plane. Like,
no,
that's got to be quite sketchy, actually. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
And forest elephants are
They're different.
a completely different beast. In terms of, we were talking about individuals and character.
Yeah.
Forest elephants. I don't have as much experience with forest elephants, but in my limited experience, very different character.
Are they a distinct species or
Yeah.
a subspecies?
They're now categorized as a different species.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. The tracking. You say tracking. Do you distinguish tracking between with the plane to tracking with GPS?
No.
Is it all the same?
No. Tracking is shorthand for GPS tracking. So that's how we get the really fine scale movement. So our tracking collars now, they'll fix a position every half hour and upload that position every 3 hours. And in times of kind of high stress and where we need rapid reaction, we'll sometimes make them report every hour if we really need to know where they are.
Right.
So that's how we build the tracking data set that helps us do all the work to protect elephants, both against short-term threats and for long-term landscape planning stuff, which is how we're going to make Africa have a future with elephants. When we use the plane for this kind of tracking is when a collar has stopped, the battery's gone down, there's no longer the GPS beacon, but it's still there's no longer GPS signal coming out every hour, but it's got a VHF beacon that's giving a pulse every second or so. And that pulse is what we can track with the plane to find out where it is so that we can replace or remove the collar.
Yeah. So there's still an excuse for you to fly around in the plane and have a great time.
There has to be.
Yeah, I'm sure. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, well, you fly around, you've got the plane, and you're flying over a beautiful landscape, tracking elephants. Like, that seems to me to be the coolest job in the world. What do you think is an even cooler job than doing that? Is there something cooler?
I thought I had the coolest job in the world when I was mapping shipwrecks, and I was diving a lot. And, and I absolutely loved diving. And then when life changed course and I had kids and didn't want to be at sea so much, I thought, and my father-in-law, Saba's father, was flying, and I was flying with him in the plane. I was thinking, and like all kids, I used to, I loved planes, right? But I'd never really been that into the idea of learning to fly, just because there was no reason to. I grew up in Oxford, England, right? You've got trains and roads and stuff.
Yeah.
But they're not so present in Africa, and actually everyone has an airstrip in their backyard,
Right.
in Kenya and wherever you want to go. So the usefulness of an aircraft is insane.
Right.
You can fly for 10 minutes and save yourself a 3-hour drive. And so I'd be accompanying Iain on this stuff, and so he started to teach me to fly, and then I became hooked on that.
Yeah, sure.
So what's cooler than fly? Helicopter pilots would they talk a good game.
That was a bunch of friends bought me for my 30th birthday. There was a pilot lesson, a helicopter lesson.
How'd you get on? I heard it's famously difficult.
A bit wobbly.
Yeah.
But it was so much fun. Like, I love the technical challenge of it all. There's so much going on.
They compare it to balancing a ball bearing on a razor on a knife blade.
Right.
Was it that hard?
Yeah. Well, you get into a wobble, and it's hard to get it. I mean, in the first 5 minutes or something, it's hard to keep it in state, because the whole wing kind of thing is flipping and flopping, and then you're overreacting, and yeah.
So I heard a terrifying story the other day. A helicopter pilot friend of mine was rescuing a baby elephant that had been orphaned up in northern Kenya, and they were taking it to the elephant orphanage, and we've now got 2 of these excellent elephant orphanages in Kenya. And sometimes a baby elephant will fall into a well, typically is what happens, and the family will try and come back, but sometimes if the baby is stuck in the well for long enough, the family will go on and move on, and they'll abandon the baby. So they then get rescued, and there's a fund they have, and they'll take these orphans back to the orphanage. And so this guy's in the helicopter, and he calls the head of the orphanage, who shall remain nameless, and says, "Do I need to strap this elephant down?" And the owner of the orphanage says, No, it's fine. Just put a cloth over its head. Anyway, so they put this baby elephant in the helicopter with a cloth over its head, and they take off, and they have to go over this mountain range to get back to the orphanage. And as they're over the mountain range, this baby elephant wakes up and goes ballistic.
Oh my goodness!
And so Chris, my friend, is trying to hold this and keep this baby elephant under control in the helicopter, and his trunk is thrashing around, and the legs are thrashing around. He says the helicopter is just doing all this crazy. Snakes in the plane eat your heart out. Elephants in a helicopter.
Yeah.
Anyway, they managed to get it down, and then they call in a plane and a team to take care of this elephant. And
right.
He asked the team. He says, so do you strap these down? He goes, oh yeah. Got to strap them down. Very dangerous not to.
I love it. I love it. What's it like? I mean, you say everybody's got an airstrip. What's it like landing on grass? I mean, I've traveled in some small planes, but always on like a concrete or tarmac runway. Is it very different? I mean, the traction's got to be different, or does that not matter? Because you're just using air.
It's like mountain biking, right? I mean, before if you're used to bicycling on roads, it's like, oh, this is how I bicycle on roads. And if you take a road bike off road, it's not very good feeling. A racing bike on a muddy track doesn't work very well. But if you try to land a normal plane off an airstrip, it doesn't go very well. But if you take a bush plane off an airstrip, it's like taking a mountain bike off road. So it's when it really comes alive, and so you really, it's a beautiful thing if you've done your homework.
Suspension, have they got
suspension? You put a bigger tire on them.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
To be honest, we're kind of wet these days. Kenya and Alaska are very similar in how they approach bush flying.
Okay.
It's all about big tires, and you fly a tail dragger, so so that you don't have a nose wheel, which is fragile. You got a tail wheel so you avoid the fragile nose wheel, and your prop is higher off the ground, and your main gear is very strong. So it's rigged for it. Back in the old days, they were flying like a Cherokee 140 is a standard trainer that they fly around the world
Right.
now. It's a nose wheel plane, low wing. And back in the old days, they're no problem landing that in a
Okay.
cornfield with nothing, land them off field anywhere, small little tires, and they were fine. But nowadays, everyone's like, well, we've got to have the big bush tires, we've got to
Right.
have the tail dragger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
I've
which is
seen.
better, but you actually don't need it. You can do it without it.
Right. I've seen stuff with. I think it's called stall, short takeoff and landing. Do you sort of follow that stuff? Are you kind of inspired by those guys that
Yeah,
they can stop in like 5 meters or something? I mean, it's just kind of crazy stuff.
yeah. No, you
Right.
will. That's they're quite popular feeds,
Right.
and we'll so we'll do a safety flight and engine off landings every 6 months just to keep yourself in training, and they always degenerate into who can land shortest and that stuff.
Great.
It's good fun. It's good fun. And
Yeah.
sharpening those skills is important for safety.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we do operate out of a lot of short strips
Right.
in bush environments. So even when I'm landing at the main airport, the game is always to see how short you can land, and can you land short enough to get off on the first taxiway.
Yeah, right. I have the feeling that still applies when you're in a big plane, because sometimes they seem to come off the runway and it's like, we're still moving
going quite
on.
fast.
Yeah.
But the worst diseases in a tail. So the thing about tail draggers is that if you get the landing wrong, they bounce
Right.
quite hard, and if you which is an uncomfortable feeling. If you're learning, they can fishtail down that. So you're always trying to get it. You're always trying to land at exactly the right speed, and
Right.
so you've lost as much momentum as possible. What tends to happen is you're trying to land right on the spot and at the right speed, and when no one's watching, it's all fine. But if you're feeling under pressure to get it right, you've got some dignitary in the plane, or or someone fancies on the ground, and you're really like, you're trying to get it right.
Yeah.
That's always when it goes wrong, and you go boing, boing.
Bounce down the runway. Oh, brilliant. You mentioned your sort of earlier career in journalism. Is it as simple as you met Saba and her family had a bit of a quirky hobby, and that's what got you into elephants? Or were you already into elephants before you met Saba? How did you transition? You've talked about the shipwreck stuff that you're doing. How did you transition across?
So I'd done a degree in zoology at Edinburgh. That was my original degree, and I started off in marine biology, and I'd volunteered on these shipwreck excavations when I was younger, which is how I got pulled into the world of treasure hunting and marine archaeology and all that. And then I was working as a journalist when I met Saba, and I came out, and of course I was completely starstruck when I met her dad. I was like, I studied you, and I'm not worthy, all that. And I did a few things with Iain, and I have to say it was a nightmare working with him, because I was doing communication stuff. He was like, "Will you help me rewrite the website?" And I was like, "Oh, all right." And he was such a perfectionist, and nothing was ever good enough. And I sort of did it, but I was like, God, I'm not doing that again. Then in 2012, when the ivory crisis was at its very height, we were losing 100,000 elephants. We lost 100,000 elephants in just 3 years. We were losing 30,000 a year at that time. And given the trends, we were going to lose elephants from the wild in a generation. And as I said, there was just a lot. It was pretty gruesome seeing what was happening. And I could see how consuming it was, not just for Iain, but for Saba and the whole family. And it's not like a hobby. It's more like an obsession. Yeah, but I mean, it was sort of everything in this family. And I was trying to sort of keep my ocean soul. I was like, this is my ocean is my thing. But it was it was all around me. And then Iain lost his chief operating officer, who was actually Lucy King, who now still works with Save the Elephants. She was the chief operating officer of Save the Elephants at the time, and she had a brain aneurysm that was caused by tick fever that she picked up in Central African Republic. And so she suddenly was out of the picture, and Iain was completely, he'd lost his right hand, and it was at the very worst time.
Mm.
And Murdoch had just bought the Times that I was working for, and I could see the writing on the wall. And I was like, well, look, let me help. Let me see if I can help him for a year while we find someone suitable to do this.
Yeah.
And that was the start of it. And I to be honest, I thought I can't. There's no point in me doing elephants because I don't know anything about elephants. And yes, I've got a degree in zoology, but I don't have a doctorate. I'm not. I'm more of a project manager, and I'm a journalist. I'm not. I don't. I'm not.
Right.
I can't be a conservationist.
Yeah.
But it turns out there are lots of different things that are needed, and it turns out we had plenty of PhDs in elephant behaviour. What we didn't have was anyone that could communicate or tell that story.
Yes.
So it's kind of. I learned then that conservation is not just about those heroes. It's about all of us that can can do the other stuff and that makes conservation work.
I'm going to come back to that. I really want to dig into that. I'm curious about the impact on you and the team. How do you carry on when you're faced with such immense loss, when you're losing elephants at that rate? And it just must be devastating for the team. How do you keep going? How do you stay resilient in times like that?
Yeah, there's the stories, and then there's the statistics. There were those kind of. So we're a research organization, and the data is our power to change things, and that's something that Iain sowed in the organization from the very start. It's about the power of fact to change the world.
Mm.
And so yes, there are all those statistics, but it's the individual losses that are the real gut punch. And when you lose matriarchs that you see their importance to their family every day of the week, and then they are gunned down. We lost a quarter of all the families in Samburu. We're left without any breeding age females, or adult females. And seeing what that does to elephant society was, as you say, really, really, really tough for the team. But I think I think everyone just that this is the mission, and that this is. I think everyone, whether you're in human conflict or conflict over what's happening to elephants, you kind of double down, and everyone gets on a war footing, and you link arms, and it's almost when the human spirit comes out, and that's where everyone bands together, and within the team, and also outside and with other organizations, everyone came together. So I think that I guess partnership and collaboration
and supporting each other.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I mean, you must have seen elephants also grieving, and does that have an impact on you? It must have an impact on if you. Do you see that they're in sort of emotional pain?
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly recorded it. It's not something you witness every day.
Right. Okay.
It's not like a carcass will be there, and you'll see a grieving circle of elephants around the around the. Nowadays we'll put camera traps out and on carcasses to observe this behavior, and it's fascinating, and it's incredibly moving to see how much attention they pay to their dead, and the stories I do remember around orphans, and seeing a baby elephant. There was a devastating. I'm trying to remember what the youngster was called, Socate, but the mother's name will come back to me, but she was killed, and when she died, it was dusk, and our team was with her. I came to join them, and the baby just wouldn't leave the body and was just sort of draped over her body and just wanting to stay in touch, just sort of trying to wake her up, and just couldn't. And we left her, but the baby was one. Like, she would have died in the bush. They can't survive without their mother's milk, and they're very vulnerable to lions at that age. So so we had to try and catch her, but we wanted to leave. We needed her to grieve,
right?
But we knew that the night would be very dangerous for her, so we left her too long, it turned out, and then had a chaotic 4 or 5 hours chasing around in the bush, trying to catch her, so that we could get her to safety.
Yeah.
But that seeing a baby's grief for its mother, that's as bad as it gets.
Yeah, sure. In addition to the ivory concerns and human impacts there's some other impacts that I remember hearing about with perhaps grazers from neighboring countries moving in and having to manage conflict with livestock and things like that. Was that a threat to elephants or the team or anything like that?
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
too far out?
So it's always been there, but it was always a sort of this. It's quite a martial culture up in northern Kenya. So if you think of Africa, you've got the band of the Sahara going from Somalia all the way over to Mali, and in all the way in the west, and underneath the full desert of the Sahara, you've got this semi-desert, semi-arid zone called the Sahel. And in the Sahel, there's not enough rainfall to support agriculture, but there is enough rainfall for a bit of plant life and for nomadic herds of people with livestock to make a living. But they have to be able to follow the rains. So they follow the rains, and they follow the grass that comes from the rains. So these nomads, I'm not going to put a date on it because we don't know. For all of recorded history, and however far back into pre-recorded history, these nomads have been wandering this area with just what they can carry, and they remain today wandering those landscapes. Except today they're no longer armed with spears; they're armed with AK-47s and whatever other weapons have come to them from all the conflicts that have appeared in those landscapes, and they're not very popular with governments. Nomads never are, right? Because it's hard to get them to register to vote, and they're not economically important. So governments are always trying to settle their nomadic populations, and it's no different in northern Kenya. So as soon as you kind of get halfway up Kenya and you move into this semi-arid zone, you're into this culture of wandering nomads and the conflicts between them. And the conflicts are always about livestock.
Right.
And mainly cows are the big value things.
Right.
Camels starting to be, but cows are what everyone wants. And the central problem is that each one of them thinks that, or certainly in our area, and I would generalize to across Africa, but the Samburu, who we work with and we love, and they are icons of how to coexist with wildlife, but the Samburu think that every cow on the planet is theirs.
Right.
Right. And if someone else has got them, it's because they were stolen off them a while back. And the Turkana and the Somalis and the Pokot and all the other tribes that wander into the fringes of Samburu, they all think the same. So they're perpetually nicking each other's livestock.
Right.
And it's like a sport for them, or always was. It's like a big part of culture, and it's what the lads do.
Right.
It's kind of in its military services. You become a warrior, and you go out, and and that's how you get status amongst the other warriors. Is were you part of this successful raid, and how many Turkana did you kill, but it was always fairly low level. Now that it's got semi-automatic weapons, assault rifles, it's kind of taken it to another level. It's remained a high status thing amongst the remoter tribes, but the remoter clans of these tribes, but it's much more deadly than it was. So you've got this kind of martial culture, and then drop into that elephants whose tusks had suddenly become valuable. And at the height of the ivory poaching years, the tusks of the biggest elephant that we had in northern Kenya, we reckoned were worth 15 years worth of salary for a wildlife ranger.
Wow.
One elephant.
Wow.
Or a year and a half of the warden of the reserve. He could get a year and a half salary just with a single pair of tusks. And that's incentive. So you've got all those guys wandering around with weapons, and it might not be culturally their thing to do to kill elephants. But if a trafficker pitches up in the nearest town and goes, hey, I'll give you this if you can give me this,
right.
I'll give you this much per kilo of ivory, they rapidly turn into poachers. So that was the challenge. So those guys are still up in that landscape, and they rely on their livestock. And it's a bit like the ocean. There's no fences. They're just wandering. They're free to roam, and the cows are the cows are fishing vessels, and the grass is the fish. Like
right.
these things are these cows are following the fish. They're eating the grass, and when there's a dry period, they will chase that grass into the last. I'm not sure why I brought up the fish. It's not really relevant. But my past life coming back to haunt me. But the reserve is unfenced. So it's tiny. It's like 200 square miles. But it's the only place in the ecosystem that's only for the animals. Right? There's no human habitation in there other than the small lodges. That's the last grass in the ecosystem.
It's near the river as well.
It's near the river, but I mean, not so much, because there's that's standing water, but it's rainfall that will cause the grass. So that it's just the fact that there's less grazing pressure on it, and everyone will stay out of it as long as there's grass to be had elsewhere. But as soon as that's the last grass, then they come into the reserve. It's not a great thing for people who've paid a lot of money to come and see elephants and lions and all the other wildlife,
right?
And they turn up and they just see goats.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned how your first impressions of following Iain around and just having known him, reading about him in textbooks and things like that. And for me, it was the same when I first got to meet Carl Jones, working with bird conservation. You're now a very visible leader, and I'm wondering how that. I mean, I look at Save the Elephants and I think, God, it's, achieved so many things on the such scale. There's a whole load of different pressures there. How does that affect you and the way that you make decisions and the work?
Yeah, being a visible leader, that doesn't come into decision making. I don't experience that myself, so that's not a thing that affects.
You don't feel any an additional pressure from
I feel the pressure to do a good job.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to get to.
It's a constant pressure, and I've got this. I mean, it's absurd. I can't. It's absurd to me how lucky I am to be in the position I am, to be working with the people I'm working with. I'll sit down for a meeting, and I've got 4 top zoologists who are absolutely top of their field working with elephants, and they're all working for us, and we're all on the same team. And I'm like, and we're putting together projects. Like I can't believe it. But then I've got to turn around and tell their story, and they've cooked up an amazing project. I've then got to go and find the money to get that project off the ground, or tell people about the project in a way that's persuasive and represents them fairly.
Right.
And so there's some pressure there, but they make it pretty easy because it's pretty. I mean, they do a lot of the representation themselves anyway. Like, I think that's something I love is. And I feel is a genuinely good way to build an organization is through pushing the work onto others and making other people do it. So I try not to feel lazy when I'm doing it. I think, no, it's actually it's a good thing. But I will. We're very. I'm trying not to be a kind of a leader that's out front and sort of it's all about me. It's actually I'd rather be. My instinct is to be much further back and behind, but I've had a lot of pressure recently over the last 5 years from from above, from the board level people, but also from the team itself. They're like, Frank, we know you don't want to be out there and beating your chest, but actually you need to bang the drum for this organization, and we need a singular figure to do that, and that is your job. And so it's not actually, as a journalist, I'm much more interested in telling people that's my joy is talking to excellent people and telling their story. It's not really talking about me and being the figurehead. So that's the bit that comes least naturally to me.
Right. I think that's interesting that there's so much humility in conservation, and so there's not a desire to be. There's quite a lot of introverts even in conservation, and we just want to kind of get the work done. But it becomes kind of just.
Did you just say we like to get the work, that you're counting yourself as an introvert?
In part,
Okay.
yeah. But I'm more as a conservationist. I was counting myself like that. There's just the desire to get the work done, but then it's a necessary part of the job is to be an ambassador for the species or the ecosystem or whatever. It's just part of it, I think.
Well, it is a part of it, but it's an annoying part of it, because actually conservation is not about an individual, and there's all these conservation prizes that are out there celebrating conservation heroes, and it's bullshit. It's actually about the organizations that do so, and it's often not just about the organization, it's about the organization plus their partners. So we were very honored to win a prize recently for Save the Elephants, a big Spanish prize for the organization. I was so chuffed.
That it was
so much more chuffed than if it had been one of our individual team that had won it, because it was a recognition that this is a team effort.
And I think we've both stood on stage and said, we're here representing all of a team that can't all be here. What has been the biggest surprise for you in becoming a CEO and leading a group of amazing people?
I had run projects before and been involved with a lot of sort of tech, like running excavations, and there's a lot of sort of technical stuff and logistics and a bit of sort of weather and danger and like that. All that stuff felt quite familiar. The running a team of deeply committed people over a long time period and the relationship stuff. I was quite surprised by how much I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And even when it gets quite difficult, scientists can be quite difficult. And our team was not immune. I'm very thin ice here because we're not that big a team. But anyway, they can, they got strong opinions and of what the way things should go and what our attitude to certain things should be. So I was quite surprised that I've quite enjoyed that. I quite enjoyed being, playing at Kofi Annan and trying to sort of calm everyone down and bring everyone together and get us pointed in the same direction. So that's one part of it. And then the other, so that's the kind of senior team bit. The other bit I've really enjoyed is seeing seeing our team grow, our Kenya team grow, and like a big big part of our approach and what our approach, everyone's approach to conservation, working with the environment in a place like Kenya, is how do we localize? How do we make this a Kenyan owned operation? Because in the end, if the people that in the people that live in the countries that still have elephants and these great stores of biodiversity that elephants defend, if they don't have these places in their hearts and their minds, they have no future. And these local teams, our local scientists, because we're really a research organization, we put a lot of effort into building up our local science team. So we've got scholarship programs and masters sponsorship programs and internships and work opportunities, all trying to sort of coax conservation talent up and lure people into conservation from the private sector so that it becomes aspirational and cool and effective and local. And that's how we create the future. And I've loved that. And I wasn't even aware of that really as being a kind of, I didn't think that would be part of the job.
Right.
But it's core and I love it.
So that speaks to sort of not just leading an organization, but leading a movement and a shift by making, like as you say, sort of making it cool. And with that, I think many people would define leadership as kind of leading it, like leading an organization or a corporation or something. But would you agree that you're kind of leading a movement? Is there a bigger definition there that of what you do that it goes beyond the organization is kind of what I'm trying to say. And
yeah, fully. I mean, part of a movement. I wouldn't say I'm leading it, but we have to be. There is a movement, and it's, I think we're saved. I'm save the elephants, right? Mm-hmm. But we are save the wild, and this is the most important mission on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, right. And I think as far as everyone should be concerned, because life is the only reason we're here, mm-hmm. and we're the only planet in the known universe that has life, and we're sniffing out, and it's humans' problems, but we can be the solution. So it feels like it is an existential crisis, and how are we not grasping this? And we need to band together, and it needs to be a much bigger movement than it is.
Absolutely.
But we're not standing still. Is it going fast enough? Absolutely not. But yeah, I think there is a movement, but I wish it would move more.
Yeah. We've faced a few challenges in terms of conservation sort of paradigms of conservation and sort of whether, I mean, Costa Rica is very well known for an eco brand, and from my perspective, it seems very much based on making protected areas and that sort of paradigm of conservation. I think as we move into an ever-changing climate and uncertainty, we're going to need more hands-on management of wildlife. Are there paradigms that you face, that different sort of perspectives? Because we're saying, well, we need to move conservation forward, but even within conservation, I think there's sometimes disagreements of how we should best go about it. Do you encounter that in your work, or is there elements of that you've navigated?
Yeah. There are. I mean, we need to be save the wild at the kind of at the tip of the spear, and then as we come down a bit and get into how you do that, there's lots of these differing approaches and strategies, and it's complicated. I mean, and the kind of national perspective is very powerful. So we're working in Kenya, and in Kenya the paradigm is nature has a right to exist for its own sake, and nature has to be wild, and a national park runs itself. There's no intervention needed. You just, whatever happens in there happens, and that is wilderness. In Southern Africa, it's a much more, the paradigm there is much more a command and control kind of structure. It's more about this land is the wild. This bit of land is wild. Let's fence it, and then we know what's there. And if it's on your land, it belongs to you. And actually, we've done the sums, and we know we should have 34 impala, we should have 15 elephants and 2 rhinos, and that's the carrying capacity. And if there are more, we'll sell them, and if there are not enough, we'll buy them in. And it's this kind of, it to my mind, ignores many of the fundamentals of that stuff when I was studying Iain, the sort of the ebb and flow of predator and prey, and writ large across the whole ecosystem. It's a symphony of change. But they have their attitude, and a function of that paradigm that they operate under is consumptive use, and it's
so that's
obviously that it's a bit like man has dominion over nature, and nature is there to serve us. Therefore, we will harvest what we need and sell it, and often the narrative is, well, we will sell it and it'll help us preserve the wildlife.
So, and I'm completely ignorant here on perspectives. I have some opinions, but so not completely ignorant, but trophy hunting. Is it still a thing? Is that happening? Is there what's your thoughts on it?
It's definitely a thing. It's still happening, and across I'm not going to say most, but across large parts of the African elephant range, trophy hunting is alive and kicking.
Right.
And my immediate reaction to it is, why the hell would you want to shoot an elephant? Like that, I find just personally, I find that very difficult to understand.
Yeah.
The challenge we have is that there are huge swathes of bushland which are kept wild because of the hunting industry. And the impacts on the population of elephants of trophy hunting is minimal. There are not enough hunters to have a big impact on that.
Not even a selection pressure, like where they're taking out the bigger individuals, so you're left with genes that are bringing smaller individuals. Like there's a classic example of cod being fished where all the big ones were taken out and you're left with a smaller cod as a result. Is that not happening?
It is happening, and it's happened. It's very likely that the elephants of India are the females are tuskless because of hunting pressure that killed all the females that had tusks, leaving only males that actually had a use for them for fighting, or had a stronger use case for these tusks, genetically speaking. But yes, in a word, if you kill and target just the biggest bulls for their ivory, you will start weeding that gene out of the gene pool.
Mm-hmm.
That's selection pressure. There's kind of it's. I think that exists, and yes, it's definitely a strike against trophy hunting as a feature of trophy hunting. It's a black market against it. It's a black mark against trophy hunting. But I think where I was going to is that we have to be careful in taking our paradigm from Kenya and imposing it on these nations that have trophy hunting, and we have to look at the big picture. And you asked me earlier on about decisions, right? How do you make decisions as a leader in the organisation? And one thing that Iain always, whenever I've been struggling with a hard decision, he's always come back to me and said, Frank, you just need to do what is best for the elephants.
Right.
And that's great guidance when you're in the mire of a political challenge. It's also a good piece of advice when you're faced with a problem like this. And how do you look after the elephants best? The most number of elephants.
Right.
And actually, if having hunters come in a couple of times a year, keeps a vast area of wilderness wild, and if that hunting industry went away, that area would be turned to farmland.
Yeah.
We should keep it. We should keep it wild. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's nice. But until we've got something to replace that activity with, we better be careful about demonising trophy hunting. Now there are edge cases. There's a particular one in northern Tanzania at the moment where, and as with all things, there's a spectrum of what trophy hunters are like. Right? There are ethical ones who do things the right way and try and make sure the money flows the right way, and perhaps rare. There are ones at the other end of the scale that are doing things in a disreputable way and breaking the rules and the norms that have been established, and that's what's happening in northern Tanzania at the moment, where a certain hunting company has taken over a concession, and they seem to be targeting the big tusked bulls that are coming south from the Amboseli population in southern Kenya, which is the longest running research site on elephants anywhere in the world, run by Cynthia Moss. And those elephants, the bull area is south of the border, and those guys are getting targeted for the tusks. And that is breaking a 30-year gentleman's agreement that these were the same population and shouldn't be hunted. And that, for me, is a catastrophe.
So there's still trophy hunting, but ivory. Where do we stand with the ivory trade?
So there's still trophy hunting. I guess the other thing that's confusing for people about trophy hunting is that it's there was such an intense and justified pressure against the killing of elephants in the poaching years. It was really, it was a global issue, and so it should have been. It was front page news on the New York Times, and there was a lot of pressure on African governments to get a handle on the poaching in their countries, and then to marry that with it's terrible for local people to kill elephants, but it's actually okay for rich Americans to come over and shoot elephants and pay lots of money for it. And you can make the case, if you've got the time, you can explain the economic arguments and all that, but in the eyes of African governments and local people in many situations, it's not quite so clear, and it comes across it becomes foggy and confusing, and I don't think it doesn't present a clean case for conservation. Where are we with the poaching? We spoke earlier about the height of the ivory crisis, where we lost 100,000 elephants in 3 years. We estimated. Today, thanks to the global alliance that came together around the crisis, we managed to get the royal we managed to get a ban on the trade within China. So the Chinese President Xi Jinping banned the trade in ivory in January the 1st, 2018, at the same time as President Obama banned the trade in America. And we've seen that the wonderful thing is that it wasn't just a declaration of a ban; it was an enforcement of the ban, and the Chinese government have been very collaborative in enforcing it and following up on intelligence tip-offs and so on. So, as far as we can tell, it's being well enforced in China. Certainly, poaching pressure across Africa has reduced dramatically. It's not completely over. There are still areas of insecurity in various spots in Africa, and where things are really chaotic and more dynamic in the security speak, and there's very little risk of getting caught for killing elephants for their ivory, it's correspondingly the elephants are getting killed, even though there's very little money to be made from ivory. There's still a sort of residual perception that it's valuable.
Right.
It's actually quite difficult for them for poachers to sell ivory because it's the penalties are now high and the risk of getting caught are high. So people don't tend to want to touch it. But in those very unsettled areas.
Right. Yeah. The current threat, the big thing now seems to be conflict and development of infrastructure, and that, the sort of corridors, that those infrastructure pieces being barriers across corridors and things. Is that right? Are those the two?
So what we've got now is that we're in a race against time, because we've got the fastest growing human population on the planet is in Africa.
Right.
And we've got development agencies like China's Belt and Road, and European developers and American developers all coming in trying to help Africa build the infrastructure it needs to develop, or in China's case, extract resources from the center of the continent. And these road networks, rail networks, oil pipelines, and so on are fragmenting ecosystems, chopping up these wild spaces, and doesn't have to be this way. So we've got this compression of wild spaces under agriculture, and then we've got the bisection by roads and railways. But using data from tracking collars, not just elephants, but across species, and smart analytical techniques, and a lot of consultation, you can get into a position where you can actually describe, you can do some landscape planning, and you can keep the essential arteries open for nature, and we can have development and we can have environment both intact.
Right.
We don't need to sacrifice the environment at the altar of development.
So it's not really a case of balancing human needs against wildlife. You see a way to have them both. Is there some particular knack to making that happen?
I think that you keep everything.
Right.
You can not lose the environmental foundations that keep these ecosystems whole. Yeah. So it's not been accomplished on any other continent except for Antarctica, where there's very little human presence. But everywhere else, we've sacrificed our great stores of biodiversity at the altar of development. It doesn't have to be. We can leapfrog that problem if we apply the tools of science and collaboration. And collaboration is the knack that you've got to get right to make it work. And that's collaborating with communities to make sure that they're on board and they see the importance and they want this thing to happen. But it's also collaborating with governments to make sure that they see the need and that they're going to seal these landscape plans in law. Because if you don't have the support of communities, you've just got to pay, and you do have the government plan, it's a paper park.
Right.
If you've got the plan, the support of the communities, but not the support of the government, then you've got something that will work very well as long as the elders and the people that you persuaded and discussed with and had got the agreement from are around. But as soon as they're gone and as soon as land prices go up, you'll lose everything.
So that's interesting, because I often think of, like, okay, conservation, our lifetimes are so short on the grand scheme of things. We need to be thinking about really long-term vision. But you just mentioned about the urgency of the project and this infrastructure development, and how do you balance the urgency with the long-term stuff?
On that particular subject, the urgency is because of the long-term stuff. If we don't act now, we're going to lose these. We're going to lose this opportunity to create the connectivity that will secure it in the long term. So we have to act now, but we wouldn't be feeling the bad effects for another 10 years, 20 years. But it's a one-way street. Mm-hmm. We can't go back there. Mm-hmm. So, across the organisation, that's a continual tension.
So the Elephants is investing in education, and that how does that contribute to your vision? It almost comes back. Does it come back to that bigger movement that I was talking about earlier? Because do you see that as the legacy that you can leave behind?
Well, leave behind sort of that implies that we're going to. There's an end in sight. I think the light at the end of the tunnel is pretty far off in Africa. I think I'm always looking at the peak human population and when that falls,
Right.
and that's the light at the end of the tunnel. For, as conservationists, we know we're going to be fighting a rear guard action. We're in retreat.
Right.
We're going to be in retreat as long as humanity is expanding.
Yes.
Nature's going to be shrinking.
Yeah.
But our job is to do the triage and figure out what bits we can hold and where we can hold the line, and then this bit falls, but we can push back there. But we're in retreat, and we're going to be in retreat as long as humanity is expanding. But as the human population starts to shrink, and the human footprint starts to shrink, then we have a chance at regaining a balance. I'm not saying that's not without problems, and all the economists are predicting doom and gloom as the human population starts to shrink. But as an environmentalist, it's the light at the end of the tunnel. That light is further off in Africa because the population is going to be growing until 2100. So we're in it for the long term there, and that's one of the last places on the planet that we have these stores of biodiversity.
Do you have hope?
Yeah.
And so, what gives you hope? Because that's from my perspective, that seems very scary. This idea that the population's still going up. What brings you hope? What are you hopeful about?
The resilience of nature gives me hope. I think seeing, having spent time working in marine conservation and seeing just how fast the marine environment comes back when you give it full protection, and the same thing happens on the land, and we have these spots. We're investing in areas where elephants were right on the brink. Places like Garamba in northeast Congo, down to the last 300 elephants. Chinko in eastern Central African Republic, down to, we thought we'd lost them completely. Then an outpost population of 50 elephants was found, and we helped a group called African Parks expand their area to encompass them. And now we found another, that population is now estimated about 150. They've got a vast area to expand back into, and these are areas, on that sort of retreat and expansion, the shifting front between humans and wildlife. These are areas where elephants are succeeding,
right,
with a little bit of help from the right people.
Yeah.
These are turning into seeds for the future, for the long-term future, and that is super exciting. And they're not small areas; they're big areas, but with a little bit of laser-focused investment of time and energy and financial support, we can change the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that keeps you going.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on. So thank you very much. We'll be linking to all of your socials and things in the show notes. Thanks very much, Frank.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me on board.